Excellent. Okay, now they're working. So, Barbara, you want to talk a bit about the cooking club, and then I'll join in? Can't hear you, Barbara. Okay.
It's helpful if I unmute myself.
It's always.
So the cooking club is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have Maureen, who is going to be starting off with something about talking about chocolate recipes. Oh my God, of course, now I'm on the phone and everybody's calling me back. We're going to be talking about really healthy chocolate recipes, dessert and for meals. But we're going to have, Maudine is going to be doing her demos in the center. So you get to see her alive and in person. But we will also have it online. So anybody who wants to join can join online. But then what we're going to do is we're going to break off afterwards, and we get to have conversations. So we'll have everybody who's in the center will get to sit and chat and talk about all good stuff, food, and anybody who is online will also get to continue and have a separate conversation so that we can really start to create this community around food. It doesn't matter whether you like to cook or whether you want to just do it because you just like cooking shows and you like to keep on. It'll be a lot of fun. But anyway, that's where I'm at. I'm going to let you go.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it too. So it's more than an hour. That's one thing that we will have the demo and some tasting and some. I'm going to try to make some opportunities so that if you have the ingredients ahead of time, you could do a little bit of the mixing and stirring and pouring in your own home. We'll see. And we're learning as we go as to, making sure this is what everyone wants, and you should give us feedback. Tell your friends about it, the whole deal. So I'm sitting in front of a window. I'm not sure because we're all kind of in the same time zone. It's looking like really ugly snow and rain mixed. Is anybody seeing the same thing? I'm so glad I'm indoors. So popping my favorite thing, the menthol cough drop. Let's get going. So the supported eating community that we are at this time from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock is generally where I will chat for about 15 or so minutes about a topic. Happy to take questions and answers. And then at the end of that, it's more of general comments and what's news, what's interesting. Should we explore any of the topics that I do in greater detail? We could tell really, crazy mom jokes, anything you want to do. All right, so here goes. How to healthify your cooking. So I thought, I think Barbara and I scared that name up, and I probably wrote it in my notes, and then I asked myself, is that really a word? And no, it isn't, but we made it one. I created a modest list of things that I would do and do in my home to healthify my cooking. But then I said, well, let me search the internet and see if anybody else has tried to pull this off. And I found something here, 10 simple substitutes for healthy eating. So I thought we could talk about this person's recommended 10, and then I'll put mine out there if there's anything new. And because we don't have to wonder where her feelings be hurt, we could talk about it and say, I wouldn't do that. Here's why. Or, oh, that's the best idea I've heard this hour. So first one, use applesauce instead of oil when baking. Now, I know whenever I've done a presentation about healthy holiday eating, if anyone enjoys baking holiday foods that are generally rich and seasonal, so they're not something you'll have on your dining table all the time, I would say use the real ingredients that give you the real quality and the taste of what you remember. But if you're a baker from day to day and you're trying to shave a few calories without stopping the foods you enjoy, it is possible to take some of the calories away because oil is 9 calories per gram, whereas something that's carbohydrates only 4 calories per gram. And as they say, every little bit counts. So even Mott's, of course, has been promoting themselves as a way to do that, suggesting that for every half a cup of vegetable oil, you could substitute that for a half a cup of applesauce. And you really pull a lot of calories out of a product. You still get a moistness, depending on whether you are using a leavening agent. You may have to consider that the applesauce has a little more acidity than the oil, so your leavening agent might be a combination of baking powder, baking soda, and now you'll be a teeny bit more baking soda. But generally, you can get away with a 1-to-1 substitution. And like everything that we've gotten good at, or continue to aim to get very good at, you can practice it, and if it doesn't come out, you can think, what can I tweak in order to do it differently next time? I generally don't have applesauce in the house because I like to take apples, boil them in quarters, and then put them in a Foley food mill and make applesauce, all of that inside of 15 minutes. But if you're not, if you if you have your applesauce on the shelf, it's always ready. Okay. Next one of the 10 simple substitutes for healthy eating is to eat brown rice instead of white rice. Now, if you're making a soup where it's got a rice in the soup and the rice is one of several ingredients, I think brown rice ought to do just fine because there's lots of moisture, lots of fluid. You don't have to worry about seeing if the rice is going to be too sticky. It's going to come out good because it's going to share the space with the carrots and the celery and the onions and other things. If you're making your favorite family rice, whatever that might be, brown rice does take practice. You really need to make sure the water content is appropriate. I remember the standard is when you have rice in a pot, you put water 1 finger's depth. If you use the little crease in your index finger, if you put that much water above the rice. But with brown rice, you need to do a little more than that. And it needs a little more time. Aside from that, I love the texture of brown rice. I think it's much better. If I were doing like a stuffed pepper, and you're going to pretty much have the rice fully cooked, I think it ought to work well. So some of the advantages of brown rice is that it has more fiber. So you can see here 0.4 grams for white rice. And this says per 100 grams. You don't have to worry about how am I going to compare 100 grams when I have it on my stove or in anywhere in my kitchen. These are just relative comparisons, but you can definitely say that you have 4 times more fiber in brown rice than you do white rice.
Okay. You have a question here. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah.
Do you want to wait till questions
sure.
to the end?
Let's do the questions as we go.
Okay. Well, I'll do it backwards only because we have a wild rice question, and then we'll move backwards to the other. So for on rice, how does wild rice compare to brown rice, or in terms of healthy choices?
I think it doesn't have as much fiber, but I would open any of my responses with, you really need to enjoy the food that you're preparing. So if you just don't want to change it, then keep the wild rice because it does have a very different texture and flavor from white or brown. But if you're a standard white rice household, I would try to lean you towards some more brown rice. The wild rice is good. I think the brown rice still has a few more pluses on its side for fiber and general nutrients.
Okay. The other question was about oil. Can if you use oil, can you substitute olive oil in recipes for vegetable oil in baking?
Yes. Most of the time we won't because olive oil is much more expensive. And if you have a solid, good quality olive oil, it has a pretty distinct flavor. But there are olive oil cakes that are recipes for them. I've watched, let's see, the America's Test Kitchen make one. Jamie, what was Jamie's last name? And they tend to be very, Oliver, yep. They're sort of dense like a pound cake. And I found that when I make my favorite carrot cake, I always use oil, but I use less than the recipe calls for. But when I made the olive oil cake by the code of the recipe, you really want to spend a lot more time whipping the oil and the sugar and the eggs together so that you do create some little air pockets for leavening. So that might be it's not exclusive to olive oil, but using any quantity of oil in a cake, you really It's not something you can just stir and pour it in the pan. It's going to come out pretty dense. But yeah, olive oil should work just fine. Yeah. um, so the advantages here, you see that says white rice has a reasonably high glycemic index, whereas brown rice has reasonably low. A glycemic index is the definition of it is how fast does a carbohydrate on your plate go to your mouth, go to your digestive system, and wind up as glucose in your blood. And the faster it becomes glucose in your blood, the higher the glycemic index. The slower it becomes glucose in your blood, the lower the glycemic index. So because the brown rice has more fiber, it takes a little more time for the enzymes in your intestines to break it down and sort of release the glucose into the bloodstream. Calories are about the same. And so you're not getting away. So it's really about flavor. If you're making a rice and beans combo, or even rice pudding, oh dear, did I say that out loud? I think brown rice is really a decent substitute, and it has, I think, the nutritional advantages are good reasons to try it out. Now, suppose you're a person who cooks your white rice or cooks your rice ahead of time, and then just simply scoop out what you're going to need per meal. You might do that and have a cooked brown rice, and a cooked white rice combo, and see how you like that. Why not? Okay. The third of the 10 recommended simple shopping, so healthifying your kitchen, is to use egg whites instead of whole eggs. Excuse me. So the goal here is to take out the cholesterol and the fat that's in the egg yolk, because anyone who's allergic to egg is allergic to any part, not just the white or the yolk, or very likely to be allergic to the whole thing. So it's not as though you're saving on an allergic response. And I was curious to see this one. By the way, I don't think it would be different if they'd used wheat flour instead of coconut flour. But what happens is a whole egg allows for air pockets to form, whereas egg white has a higher water content and may not have the pockets form as neatly. I would say, since this is not my list, but someone else's, you could go ahead and use real eggs when you bake. In part because while you are monitoring your total cholesterol, my hunch is you're not going to eat the whole thing that you baked. And if you end up eating a fifth of it or an eighth of it, then the amount of cholesterol you're getting from that egg is going to be pretty minimal. And it will fall within the dietary targets, which is for the DASH diet, which is mostly about managing blood pressure, 200 milligrams a day, and for other dietary targets, 300. And that'll fit in fine. So this is a suggestion that I might be a little less enthusiastic about. Okay, any questions, Barbara?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Susan and she says, is that still so? So I guess it's in reference to something you said, Susan, you can clarify. I hear more often recently that the whole egg is healthy and that cholesterol does not actually affect your own levels.
I have to agree with that. I think the research doesn't give you A leads to B. Eating eggs is going to give you a heart attack. How much cholesterol is in an egg and what is the rest of your diet looking like is not going to have a ginormous impact on your cholesterol level and heart disease risk. But it is recommended that you not eat 3 eggs a morning, or in the course of the day, that you look at other sources of cholesterol and other sources of fat and kind of make them all fit together. And the egg industry will happily send you your weight in research papers on that. And I mean it, your weight. Okay. Another one, number 4. Choose multigrain or whole wheat pasta instead of white pasta. And here's where I agree, as with brown rice, that you're getting an advantage, pardon me, that you're getting more fiber The ingredients in the pasta, if it was an egg noodle or without, shouldn't be a big difference. And you see here that the protein content is about the same. The carbs are fairly similar. But you are getting the whole grain food, and that's better. But here's where I would put the dot dot dot. I've tried whole wheat pasta, and I just don't enjoy it. I love brown rice. I love whole wheat bread. So I share that with anyone as to say if you buy it and it doesn't, it doesn't bring you joy, like the woman who help you declutter, then it should bring you joy. All right. So I want to remind everybody from a talk that I gave some time ago that in the case of rice and wheat, when they're served hot, they have what's called a higher glycemic index because the glucose that's part of the starch gets absorbed and released into your bloodstream faster. But when you serve them cold, like cold rice could be something in sushi or cold rice salad, or cold pasta, cold noodles, has a much lower glycemic index, and that's an advantage for a lot of people. Not necessarily or not exclusively for people with diabetes. Okay, any questions, Barb? So I move on.
Nope, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, regarding the difference between brown rice and white rice, whole wheat flour, white flour, I put in a couple of pictures just to see if these would be useful. The wheat kernel, and I hope I don't bore you if I've gone through this song and dance before. As with the wheat kernel, as with seeds all over the globe, has evolved to develop organs and parts that protect it so that it can perform its one very important function, which is to fall on the ground and sprout into a new plant and make 1,000 more seeds. So the wheat has all these different structures. The outer part is the bran, and as you see, it has lots of different layers. The inner part is the starchy center called the endosperm, and over here is the germ, and that is where there are also iron, other vitamins, vitamin E, for example. So when a grain, whether it's rice or wheat or corn or barley, when it is refined, this bran and this germ are separated, and what we end up with is the starchy center, which is a little more naked, so to speak, but it is what humans have been preferring for thousands of generations. Now, the next one is a more simple version of the same picture. A little less grainy, but also missing a whole lot of that structural stuff. The same story goes with it, however. The germ and the bran have extra nutrients that are removed when it is milled or refined because it separates it, and we get the starchy endosperm. Now, the endosperm has some vitamins and a teeny bit of iron, but not much. This is really where the seed is getting its energy for its growth. So, in the mid-1940s, right after World War II, a committee, as a part of the government, made a law that any grain used as a staple must be enriched. And enriched means the addition of, I think my supervisor is at the door. Can you excuse me? The supervisor is the 13-pound fur ball. Hold on. Newsflash. I didn't open the door, so she just jumped on my bed. So let's continue.
Perfect. Okay, and then when you get to it, there's a question for how does durum wheat pasta fit in? So when you're done with that, then we'll.
Thank you. Good one.
Sure.
So the enrichment law requires that any grain that's going to be used as a staple has to have thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, and iron added to it in a quantity equivalent to the amount that would have been in the whole grain. And mind you, this is over 70 years ago. If I learn how to count, I could probably give you a more precise number. And then in the late 1990s, folic acid was added to the enrichment. So there's two pieces of trivia here for your next cocktail party. If you say a food is enriched by law, that only refers to a grain that is used for a staple. So you're not supposed to put on your label, I've enriched my orange juice or enriched my soda. Those words, that process has to be called fortified. I did say trivia, so, living up to my promise. And the other little piece of interesting twist on that is that if I'm using my flour to make cookies, they're not considered a dietary staple. Bread is considered a staple, crackers are considered a staple, as is pasta, as is rice. But the flour does not have to be enriched by law if it is going to be used to make something that's more like fun food. But major companies like making Oreos or making oatmeal cookies and Pepperidge Farm, they use enriched flour when they make their breads and their pastries, but they don't have to by law. A company added so much extra enrichment to their flour so that they could make a donut that they could sell in the school breakfast program and sell it as this has the equivalent of twice the amount of nutrients as a slice of bread, just by putting it in the flour. Okay, last little trivia on this one was one of the enrichment nutrients is niacin, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, iron, and folic acid. And some people might know that you used to be able to be prescribed niacin if you had high cholesterol. And one of the reasons why it wasn't terribly popular was if you took the niacin tablet, you got flushing. Your skin would feel like it was on fire and crawling away. It's short term, but it would happen. And there was an incident in New York City in the 1990s in which the flour purchased by a baker who made bagels had an inappropriate amount of niacin added, or the niacin had not blended well. So it was an unusually high concentration in the bagels. And people ate the bagels and got the flushing, and it was reported as an adverse reaction to food. It wasn't food poisoning. No one suffered permanent damage, but it must have been kind of scary. But it was the right thing. It was enrichment. So let's hear from the question.
Oh, I think this is more of a comment from Barbara. I love bonza pasta made from chickpeas.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I haven't had it yet. What's wrong with me? I have to get some before the week is over. And those would then be fortified, or see, I tried to use the word right. The combination of the chickpea flour and any other grain food that you add to it is going to make for complete protein. So that's good stuff. And I have tried to make gluten-free foods, pancakes or waffles. And the gluten flour also does not have wheat, but it can still be made of a grain. So it may have some rice flour in it. It may have some barley flour. It may have some potato starch and other things. Okay, next slide. We're talking about these 10 tips to healthify your kitchen. And tip number 5 is select low-fat cheese over full-fat cheese. Now the goal is not just less calories, but also less saturated fat. And it says without compromising flavor. I think it's a good idea if you don't mind. If it really makes a difference, then you can selectively have your full-fat cheese, as it is a wonderful source of protein and calcium and a treat. I have often found that low-fat cheeses just simply have a tougher texture. They may not melt like a grilled cheese sandwich, but we don't have to all be so fussy. And I think we can save on some saturated fat and some cholesterol and calories, and also still get our protein and our calcium by having reduced fat cheese. If you can't find it, life goes on. Let's just enjoy. But I think it's a good tip. Okay, another tip is to use fat-free yogurt, particularly Greek-style yogurt, instead of sour cream. And I think this is a good idea, and not because I would bash sour cream. Sour cream it's fat, it's saturated fat. But at least Greek yogurt also has protein. It has a tiny bit of lactose, and it's satisfying. I think it's a better deal. And by the way, I say Greek style because if you take ordinary routine yogurt like Dannon and you put it through cheesecloth that lines a sieve or strainer, and you give it 8 hours over a bowl, the whey, WHEY, will drip out, and what remains behind is a thick, creamy yogurt, and that's what Greek style yogurt is. Now, the Greek style yogurt, every yogurt has a slightly different bacterial kind of magic formula. Lactobacillus, all of them, but they may vary ever so slightly. Like they say, San Francisco sourdough is unlike anybody else's sourdough, but sourdough. So there is a Greek yogurt which may have a much more unique flavor if you are a connoisseur, but in general, to have that texture, you can strain ordinary yogurt. My thing as a straining ordinary yogurt is now I have a fairly significant amount of whey in a cup, in a bowl, in a jar, and I hate to throw anything out, so I haven't found anything I can do with it that makes it work. One time my daughter had a friend visiting and she thought it was lemonade and poured it in a glass and took a big gulp, and the rest you can imagine. So here, if you took a cup of butter in your recipe and you cut that in half and used 1/4 of a cup of Greek yogurt, you've made a good substitute, adding some little more protein, keeping the moisture, keeping the fat, keeping the ability of the butter to once again creamy and capture air pockets. Clearly the straight shift from sour cream to Greek yogurt. If you have a recipe that calls for buttermilk, and I love buttermilk recipes, they somehow are just indescribably tastier. And this is something I might do like every 3 months, not every week. If you don't have buttermilk, 2/3 of a cup of plain yogurt, this time not Greek yogurt because you don't want it that thick, you want it to be thinner, and 1/4 of a cup of milk, and kind of let them sit out and get acquainted in the same jar too. And you can have this pretty much the same tang and flavor. And heavy cream for Greek yogurt and mayo for Greek yogurt. I thought the mayo substitution would never work, but I tried it once and I was pretty happy with it. Okay, let's look at number 7. Any questions, Barbara?
No, we're good right now.
We're good, rolling along.
Yeah, okay. You're answering everything.
So number 7, which is a great idea, try fresh herbs and spices instead of salt and salt-based herbs. And this is just a good idea. There's no argument against this. Anyone that says, nah, that's a dumb idea, come on over, let's have a chat. I think the one thing that might need extra chat is that we have very few herbs. Most of us don't have many herbs in the house, so stock up. The other thing is that the connoisseurs say you definitely need to replace your herbs at least once a year, because some of the oil part of the seed or the flavoring agent in the leaf, like rosemary, can sometimes become rancid and the flavor is lost. And I repeat that, and yet I know I violate that. So the other thing so the fresher the better. Explore. I always find recipes that say add a teaspoon of parsley. I will add a tablespoon and still think it needs a touch more. You might be a bit more cautious with peppers. A little scraping of nutmeg just also gives things just a little more depth and warmth. They can go on anything. Your chicken, your on beef, and a soup and a stew. Just a little scraping, not too strong. Let's see. Any questions about herbs, dried herbs? Last spring, I think we did a talk about foraging in the supermarket in the springtime. And I noted that if you do have basil or mint or even thyme, you can often, especially, by the way, I'll throw in there, scallions, they can go in a cup of water and last quite a long time, and sometimes even sprout to be plantable. I haven't found that to be the case with sage, although I know people who have propagated their sage that way. But my daughter makes a joke, there's no reason to ever buy scallions once you buy your first bunch. Because if you leave them in water, they'll just keep on growing. So there might be some things that you can keep fresh and kind of review, bring them back every few days, every few weeks at the latest, and keep them very tasty. So I'm going to move on. Number 8. There we go. So I'm from that generation that grew up on canned food. I think one of my favorite foods ever was canned tomato soup, and you know the brand name. And it was always with a grilled cheese sandwich or a cheese sandwich if you didn't bother with the grill. So the question is, if you're using a cream-based soup, can you use skim milk or low-fat milk instead of the actual cream? And I think, or if you're making from scratch rather. And the answer is you can always use a cream. You can use yogurt, although careful, heat will sometimes make it separate. You can thicken soups with oatmeal if it's in a very fine powder. And I found this recipe for cream of anything soup for people who don't enjoy opening a can. And it's essentially a tablespoon of butter or oil. So you can do oil or you can do half and half. A fourth of a cup of finely diced. So that could be mushroom, could be celery, any ingredient you like. And this is the website where this recipe is. The recipe goes on with instructions on how to blend your flour and your liquid so that you make a creamy base. 1.5 cups of milk, some crushed celery seeds, salt and pepper as desired. And I do enjoy a fresh homemade soup. Okay, I wouldn't bash anyone for still buying canned condensed soup. Next one, number 9. Like we're still on this goal of getting away from white flour into whole grain. And that is one of the campaigns of the many different health sources. Try to have half your grains whole. So in this case, we're talking, what if you took white flour and replaced it with whole wheat flour? I do have a fair amount of experience with this, and I say as long as you don't do 100% substitution, you're usually going to get a good product. But if it's 100%, it sometimes comes out kind of stiff, as though if it were if you're making bread in either bread machine or doing your own kneading, or if you're making waffles or pancakes or biscuits, or even making your own crackers. That's kind of a fun rainy afternoon activity if you have the ingredients. 100% whole wheat can really come out very styrofoamy if you haven't had some practice with playing with the ingredients. Now, occasionally, I will have a recipe for something using white flour, and I want to make it a little more, punch it up, give it more fiber. So instead of adding whole wheat flour that I may not have in the house, I may have a bag of wheat germ, and I may have a bag of wheat bran. So when we were talking about the different structures here, if I took 100 pounds of whole grain wheat and I refined them, and it goes through crushing the seed and then a blower shooting the particles in the air, and they land on different mesh of different closeness, and the finer particles become cake flour, and the sort of average particles are going to be sort of all-purpose flour, and then you'll have whole wheat flour. But over on the side, if you're not collecting, when you get rid of all the particles, you'll have a little pile of bran and a little pile of germ. Most of the flour that we buy is called 70% extraction rate. In other words, if you had 100 pounds of this, you're going to get 70 pounds of this and 30 pounds of bran and germ. And these two usually go to the pet food industry. Now, so if you happen to have a bag of wheat germ or a bag of wheat bran, which you should keep in your freezer because they will have a little more fat than white flour alone, and they will get rancid. You'll open the bag and sniff it, and you'll say, I'm not so sure. It won't make you sick, it just won't smell good. But you could just do a tablespoon of each of these in with your white flour and kind of wing it. And then you, once again, just practice and see if you found the proportions to work for your outcome. Okay, number 10, use ground turkey or ground chicken or really ground beef for your chili. Now, I think most, or meatballs or burgers. I also say add more vegetables. I have enjoyed chili with some of those wonderful herbs, the basil and of course, the sort of southwestern flavor herbs, but also throwing in lots more parsley and cilantro and so on. But dice up some celery and more carrots and throw in more beans and throw in some corn and throw in more plant foods. So your chili is like 1/3 animal ground up beef and maybe 2/3 vegetables, and then you can serve that over whole brown rice. What would someone use if they weren't using ground turkey or ground chicken or extra lean beef? Probably standard ground beef, like it's 20% lean, 80% lean. If you pour off your oil after you cooked your meat, I think you're kind of back to square one with lean meat. But you paid for the beef rendered fat that you poured off. So maybe that's the goal, to see economically what you feel like you're getting the most for your money. Now, those were the 10 ideas of that particular writer for that particular website. And these were the ones that I kind of generated and I was going to expand on. Incorporating anti-inflammatory foods, because that makes every meal healthier. Anti-inflammatory foods in a nutshell are colorful vegetables and fruits. Tomato has the highest anti-inflammatory score of anything else. And again, that could be canned tomatoes, they could be fresh, they could be cherry tomatoes, anybody's tomatoes. Thicken with oatmeal, so I kind of tossed that in there when we were talking about soup. A lower glycemic index, which came up briefly when we were comparing brown rice to white rice, meaning that these would be carbohydrate-rich foods that have the carbohydrate is a little slower to get from your mouth to your digestive system to your blood as glucose. And add more beans. A daily serving of beans is recommended. I heard something on the radio about 3 weeks ago. I didn't get the source, but I'm sure I could search for it, that having a serving of beans every day made life 4 years longer. I don't know how you make a number like that, but it definitely sold me. And then in general, reduce meat. And this means, yes, we should be aiming for a more plant-based style of eating. And as far back as the 1970s, the American Heart Association, probably earlier, but that was when I became a dietitian. The American Heart Association's goals were to eat no more than 6 ounces of meat a day. And 6 ounces of meat in the form, let's say, of a steak or chicken or fish will look like 2 decks of cards. And if that's the quantity of animal flesh that you're including, that is not associated with higher cholesterol or higher blood pressure or kind of out of control calories and so on. But most people want to eat that much at one meal and perhaps duplicate it at a second meal. So many of the recipes and the consumer handouts showed ways of putting the meat on the plate and spreading it out to look like a lot when it was really only 3 ounces per serving, so that you could do 6 ounces per day. Now I think that's the end. Here are my references. Happy to have an open discussion or open some more questions, more comments.
Okay, yeah, now's a good time if anybody wants to unmute or just put more questions in the chat.
Do you
Barbara?
recommend putting nuts and seeds in the refrigerator?
The recommendations are that they should be in a cool, dark place. So refrigerating is okay, as long as, once again, they're airtight. The idea is that the nuts have an unsaturated fat, which is a bit more delicate and therefore could go rancid from the effect of the ambient temperature. They should also be airtight because nuts, the fat of nuts can also go rancid with exposure to oxygen. And so heat, oxygen, ultraviolet light, so that's why it says cool and dark. So the place that wouldn't be good would be whatever the shelf is above your stove, especially if it's in a sunny window. But even that, you probably could consume your nuts fast and be okay. I have gone to buy nuts at, you guys know, on Broadway, Lot Less, and the almonds were, good price. And I read the date on the back, but when I got them home, they didn't taste really fresh. So my hunch is that it's not that they were in a sunny window or in a hot room. They just were older than they should have been. And they were edible, but I took them back. He wasn't happy. Why should he be? So yes, refrigerate is probably more than you need to, but it wouldn't hurt.
Thank you.
Eggs also, we all refrigerate eggs. But you know how some refrigerators have those little circular little depots for you to take your eggs out of the carton? Your eggs should also be as wrapped and not airtight, but somewhat sealed, because they continue to lose carbon dioxide through the shell. And it's the loss of that gas through the shell of the egg that also increases the deterioration of the egg. It doesn't necessarily make it go bad, as in bacteria. Has anyone ever broken a bad egg? You don't forget that. But if you break an egg and the yolk seems to wander 7 inches away, that's an old egg. Or that's an egg that lost a lot of its the gas towards through the shell, and then that air pocket got bigger and bigger and bigger and stretched the yolk. They're still good to eat. They're just not pretty. Who cares about pretty? They're good.
Is that it? Anybody else?
I have one other question. Whenever I eat pasta, my stomach gets like swollen almost after I eat it. That's why I switched to the Banza chickpea pasta, and it never happens if I eat that pasta.
You were very likely gluten sensitive or wheat sensitive. And if you're comfortable with it, you can definitely see a cause and effect. I think it's a smart move. But what about if you eat a sandwich? You have the same.
If I eat too much bread, it also happens.
Yeah.
So I usually only eat 1 slice of bread a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would say it's the dose that makes the poison. It's a little dark, but yeah.
But why is the chickpea pasta different?
If it doesn't have the gluten, my hunch is that that's
yeah,
what you're
doesn't.
sensitive to.
Yeah, it doesn't.
There is a pretty good pool of information about. Way back when I trained a long time ago, it was gluten allergy, period. Nobody else, nothing else. Everybody else was just whining and complaining. The worried well. Okay. But it turns out there is really a good body of evidence that people can be wheat sensitive. And it's certainly not life-threatening. Excuse me, the way a proper wheat allergy can be life-threatening. Because with celiac, you lose the ability to absorb your nutrients because the architecture of the inside of your small, actually the intestinal length, I think, is the whole way, not just any little region. And if you don't absorb, you get malnutrition, and certainly a person can become very sick due to malnutrition. And if you don't die of malnutrition, by the way, I'm not trying to promote death here, but just if you have malnutrition, you are more prone to illness, and viral illnesses will be more virulent if you have malnourished. And it would be unfortunate if it was only a fact that you were unaware that gluten was destroying your intestine's ability to rebuild itself. Okay, but a wheat sensitivity could be something completely different, with the symptoms being pain and bloating and discomfort. So I'm glad you discovered it, and I'm glad you know where your threshold is.
Thank you.
How are we doing, Barbara?
Oh, there we go. Unmuted. Yeah, Susan just commented that nuts don't get a chance to get rancid in my house. Yeah, no, my house either.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, everything tastes better with some nuts thrown in.
Everything.
And I've taken to snacking them wantonly, and I should not, especially since I'm doing the 21-day jump start again. I know it's just a
nice.
small portion, and I'm forget about it. I keep confessing all my sins to them.
They're so good.
I have not been following it as closely as I'd like, but today
That's why it's called a challenge.
I made a fabulous soup today, and I stuck in some quinoa while it was cooking with a little bit of white macaroni because it was left over. But every end of a vegetable that I had in my freezer, plus some fresh ones, went into that soup, and I had a little vegetable broth left over. And so I put it all in with some added water because I don't like all the salt that was in that broth, and made a wonderful pot of delicious soup. So I'm getting back on track.
Barbara, you'll send me her address, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I might be there with you.
Yeah. There was a whole joke about what to do with things that aren't that you don't finish. So what was Martha Stewart's recommendation? I don't know if they were her real ones or whether they were her real ones, but somebody with a really good sense of humor. But if you have leftover marshmallows, mini marshmallows, stick them in the bottom of your ice cream cone so that the ice cream doesn't melt through the bottom. And the person's joke was, who takes that long to eat an ice cream cone?
Sounds like me.
Yeah.
I have actually stopped eating for a little while, which is also a good thing in my book. That takes up most of the space in my freezer at normal times. Containers of ice cream.
It's food that puts a smile on our face, really, I hate to say it's a good idea that you cut back, but where your comfort zone is, that's what's important.
Yeah, and I love vegetables anyway, so I'm happy with beans and vegetables, and I like to cook, so I'm happy throwing together something I haven't tried before and making it work. Herbs, lots of herbs in the closet, in the refrigerator, on the shelf.
Have you tried putting them in water to see if they would root?
I rooted some. I haven't been able to grow anything, even the stuff that does grow well in my garden. When I take a cutting and I bring it home, I don't know what's going on in my house. Even a plant that you can't kill died. Oh, and in fact, I have to water. I have a plant that I haven't watered in a while. One that still lives.
I read somewhere that a plant that doesn't get watered for a while actually can come back to life with even more vigor, as though it was dormant. Tell us about it, Barbara.
Well, it lost a lot of its leaves. It's an ivy, and it's lost a lot of its leaves. They've turned yellow and fallen off, but I have to go water it. I meant to do it yesterday, and I got sidetracked. I keep getting sidetracked. I have to go walk also.
The weather's not promising. It's a yucky weather day, but yeah.
I have read that. Oh, I'm sorry. I have read that you can use nuts as a substitute sometimes in recipes for meat.
Yeah.
Can you provide any information on that? Because I would be interested in that, but I don't know how to do it.
I'm not sure either.
Because specifically I saw cashews mentioned. It was in a New
Mm.
York Times recipe. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. They said it was a good substitute for meat.
I've seen ground cashews in a patty to make kind of a burger. Or you could use them like stuffing a mushroom or stuffing a pepper. But I don't know them in a casserole. I haven't done that before, but I have seen the other recipes. And each of the nut growers has a special interest firm that will send you lots of recipes.
Oh, I'm sure that's a good idea.
Yeah, the almond growers, the walnut growers, the peanut growers, everybody has them. And one of my favorite places, because I always think everyone should eat more beans, I think we might have looked at this at one point, the Bean Institute. And first of all, I just think it's a beautiful website because I'm a sucker for a pretty website. And they have lots of ideas. I don't know how many nuts get discussed here, but featured recipes, all recipes, and there's lots. Yeah. I did go on the site one time where it says Asian. Someone see it with me? Because it's right there in the next to the letter, something with the letter A. But it turns out they're not really very Asian, not like China or Philippines or Japan, but they're all good. They're all wonderful. So I send everybody to the Bean Institute, but similarly, you can get lots of ideas from the special interest. I mean, they're the PR firms that represent the growers and distributors. So the more you buy, the happier they are.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Because I noticed the yogurt people do that too. They put yogurt in like everything. They'll show you recipes.
Yeah, everything. The avocado people have a website, and each of them will also, well, because I guess I'm getting it very selectively, but send information to dietitians about how this is good for your patients with diabetes, this is good for your patients with heart disease, your patients with allergies, and so on. But all of that is should be easy to get. And then careful, when you ask for one, you're going to get 100. Let's look at something other than ground up turkey. Okay, let's look at that one. That's much cuter. Anything else, anybody?
I'm making, right now, I'm making some more because I finished the others. Sweet potato chips. I do it in my microwave.
Tell us about
And I
it.
made them last weekend in my son's air fryer. I brought up what I had left and they all gobbled them up and I made them in the air fryer. And you know what? They came out better in the microwave. They came out crisper than in the air fryer. But
Okay,
I don't have an air fryer. So maybe we didn't put it at the right heat for the right time. I don't know. But mine were better. And my daughter-in-law said they don't stay crisp after you leave them out for a while from the air fryer. Mine stay crisp for days if they're left.
Wow.
So
Okay, so
you
you
make the
use
sweet potato, you cook them first? I'm assuming.
I slice them very thin. I'm not even using the mandolin because it's under a bunch of stuff. I'm too lazy. I sliced them as thin as I could and laid them out on the tray on my microwave. And I do cycles at about 5 or 6 power, a couple of minutes at a time because I don't want them to burn. And then I turn midway through. And then within about 10, 15 minutes, depending on the power I used and how many are in there, they come out, let them stand for an hour and they get really nice and crispy. And they're like, you'd buy a bag of potato chips, but I know what's in them. It's just the potato.
You season them?
Sweet potatoes.
You peel them? Do you peel them first
Nope.
or you scrub the skin?
Nope, I just wash them off. Yeah, I like the peels. And in fact, I used to like, if I had a potato, I say crisp it in the oven. I want the skin. I wouldn't even eat the potato because I like the crispy, crunchy skin.
I scrub my sweet potatoes, soap and water and a scrub brush. Not that I'm worried about, I mean, dishwashing liquid. Yeah, I do wash them.
Does it leave a taste? I have a brush and water.
So I think we're all fine, but I remember reading this, I don't know, 10 years ago, that when we were growing up, and you had sweet potatoes in a bin somewhere, they invariably sprouted. And while they make those lovely vines, you don't want that in your house. So the sweet potato growers coat them with a hormone that inhibits sprouting.
Oh, really?
It doesn't affect us as humans. I'm not sure the name and I'm not sure how, but it's a sprout inhibitor. And just in case, though, I still scrub them with soap and water. Probably if you're getting them from a farmer's market, they haven't done that.
Well, I took a picture. I don't know if you can see this. I took a picture. My daughter-in-law gets deliveries from Whole Foods, and they wrap their sweet potatoes in a plastic, a tight plastic. And this one was gorgeous. It grew underneath the plastic, and I had to take a photograph of it. It was just so pretty.
I see the phone, but I don't. Oh, now, okay. Oh, wow.
So I have two pictures. I said, "Oh my God, they're gorgeous. How do I not take a picture of this?" And then I cut it up, and we used, that one I cut away where the root was growing, and the potato was very good.
Thank you for that idea. I'm going to try it this week.
Yeah, do.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that too. That sounds great.
They're good to dip in hummus, or, if you have something you want to just eat by the spoonful, you can scoop it up with a chip.
Oh, sounds great. So you don't roast it first. You just simply slice it as thin as possible and put it on in the microwave, and you do like 5 minutes and then give it a rest, then another 5.
This is one that's not quite finished. Let's see, it's on this side. It's not quite finished yet. It's gonna go back in. But it's getting crispy. And
this is great.
Power 4 or 5 and keep an eye on it so it doesn't burn.
So not 100%.
Try it. Let me know how it turns out.
Okay. Will do.
And of course, if you want to put seasoning on it, you could do that too. But I'm a plain, as it grows is the way it goes in.
Yeah. I like to say I'm a cheap date. You don't have to get it fancy.
I do like Talenti gelato, though. I must confess.
I like that too.
I think the support group is sort of shifting here, right? We don't need 12 steps. Just enjoy.
It's about balance.
Yes, that's right.
What is my guilty pleasure? Let me think. Well, I really still like popcorn.
Oh, well, that's healthy.
And popcorn and beer. Yeah, and salt. I don't go low on the salt. I get crazy on
butter
salt.
Butter on the popcorn or dry popcorn?
No, I don't.
Just
I like
popcorn.
it cooked in fat because I do the old-fashioned shake the pot on the stove. I mean, I look like I'm going to the moon, but I didn't do the whole thing. But I do use and canola
You're burning
oil.
off the calories.
There you go. I'm doing upper body. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's 3 o'clock. Can you believe the time went fast?
I can't believe the time.
Great.
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Thanks
All right,
for joining.
and hopefully we'll see you next month in RSS, if you can, and if not, online for the cooking club. Talk about guilty pleasures. We got chocolate.
Yeah, sounds good to me.